Hello, everyone. Today we have a very interesting story about how genuine motivation can transform perceived weaknesses into incredible strengths, especially when it comes to what many might call laziness. By the end of this story, we'll learn how strategic thinking and a powerful why can lead to extraordinary achievements, even when faced with overwhelming odds. But that's not all. As we journey through this tale, we will also discover the hidden potential within ourselves, learning to see challenges not as roadblocks, but as fertile ground for innovation and ingenious solutions. Prepare to be inspired by a unique perspective on effort, intellect, and the power of purpose. Once upon a time, nestled in a valley cradled by gentle hills and crisscrossed by meandering rivers, there was a tranquil village. Life here moved at a rhythm dictated by the seasons, sustained by the rich soil and the bounty of nature. In this village lived a young man, often misunderstood by his peers and even by some elders. Let's call him the ingenious villager. He was not physically robust like the blacksmith's son, nor endlessly diligent like the farmer's daughter who toiled from dawn till dusk. Instead, the ingenious villager possessed a mind that constantly sought the path of least resistance, not out of a lack of desire to contribute, but from an innate drive to find the most efficient way to accomplish any task. He had an aversion to unnecessary exertion, a trait many mistook for simple idleness. The ingenious villager's family cultivated vast rice paddies, a demanding occupation that required constant vigilance against pests and the relentless labor of tending the crops. His role from a young age was to protect the delicate rice shoots from flocks of hungry birds. Most children, and even adults, would spend their days shouting, waving long poles, or clacking stones together, expending considerable energy under the scorching sun. But not the ingenious villager. He observed the birds' patterns, their flight paths, and their predictable feeding times. He noticed how they startled at sudden, unexpected movements and bright flashes. Instead of running himself ragged, he spent days in his workshop, not avoiding work, but thinking about it. He gathered discarded bamboo poles, reflective shards of pottery, and lengths of sturdy twine. With these humble materials, he devised a system that was nothing short of revolutionary for their small village. He erected tall bamboo poles at strategic points across the paddy, each topped with a small, lightweight contraption designed to spin freely in the breeze. From these spinning tops, he suspended an array of shiny pottery shards and small wind-activated noisemakers. Then, using a clever system of taut, interconnected ropes, he linked several poles together, terminating in a single, comfortable seating area at the edge of the field. From this shaded spot, with a gentle pull on a single rope, he could activate multiple scare devices simultaneously. The glinting reflections, the rattling noises, and the sudden synchronized movements would send flocks of birds scattering without him ever needing to stand up. He could monitor the entire field, sip on cool water, and even sketch new ideas in his notebook, all while effectively protecting the crops. The older farmers initially scoffed, whispering about his laziness and predicting ruin. Yet, season after season, his family's yields were consistently among the highest, with minimal crop loss to birds. His father, a wise and patient man, observed his son's methods with a mixture of pride and quiet concern. He saw the brilliance, yes, but also wondered about the resilience his son might lack should truly brute force be required. What if, his father often mused to himself, a task came that could not be outwitted, only endure? Would my son know how to fight with his hands as well as his mind? This unspoken worry lingered like a distant cloud. The ingenious villager, however, lived by a simple philosophy: why exert great effort when a little thought can achieve the same, or even better, results? His mind was a labyrinth of potential shortcuts, a factory of ingenious solutions. He once redesigned their irrigation system to use natural gradients more effectively, cutting down the daily water-carrying chore by half. He built a simple, hand-cranked mechanism to sort seeds, saving hours of tedious manual labor. His creations, though often born from a desire to conserve his own energy, invariably benefited the entire family, freeing up time for other pursuits and reducing physical strain on everyone. He wasn't lazy, he was an efficiency innovator, ahead of his time in a world that valued sweat more than ingenuity. Yet the true test of his character and the catalyst for his transformation was yet to come. A challenge that would demand not just cleverness, but a profound, unshakable purpose. Life, however, has a way of presenting situations that no amount of clever engineering can entirely circumvent. One particularly harsh year, an unforeseen blight swept through the region, attacking the rice paddies with a vengeance. The plants, once vibrant and strong, began to wither, their grains shriveling before maturity. The ingenious villagers' usual methods for maximizing yield were useless against this invisible enemy. It was a crisis that demanded immediate, backbreaking labor, not just from one field, but from every single one, to try and salvage whatever small portion of the harvest remained. His father, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the disaster and the relentless effort required, fell gravely ill. The healer shook his head, lamenting the fever that consumed the patriarch, weakened by worry and ceaseless toil. Suddenly, the ingenious villager found himself facing a future he had never contemplated. The family's meager savings dwindled rapidly, exhausted by medicines and the inability to sell their ruined crops. The creditors began to whisper, their demands growing louder with each passing day. The very roof over their heads, the legacy of generations, was now at stake. He looked at his ailing father, his mother's tear-streaked face, and the worried eyes of his younger siblings. He felt a cold knot of despair in his stomach. All his clever mechanisms, all his efficiency hacks meant nothing in the face of this existential threat. His previous laziness now felt like a heavy cloak of guilt. Why didn't I learn to truly labor, he thought, his heart heavy with regret. Why did I always seek the easy way? My family needed strength, and I offered only cleverness. Just as hope seemed to wane, a monumental announcement echoed through the village square. A royal herald, resplendent in the king's colors, proclaimed a grand competition. The king, concerned by the recent misfortunes plaguing his land and seeking to foster ingenuity among his people, had declared a challenge unlike any before. The winner, the one who demonstrated the most remarkable blend of strength, wit, and determination, would receive a king's ransom, a colossal chest overflowing with gold coins, enough to secure a family's future for generations. The villagers buzzed with excitement and ambition. Strong young men, seasoned warriors, and cunning merchants from all corners of the kingdom began their preparations. When the ingenious villager, driven by a sudden, fierce resolve that burned away his guilt, declared his intention to participate, a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. "Him?" scoffed a burly lumberjack, flexing his biceps. "He's the one who tries to do everything without moving. How will he compete against real men?" A merchant's wife snickered. "He'll probably try to invent a machine to win the race for him." The ridicule stung, but it also solidified something deep within him. This was not about proving them wrong. This was about proving himself worthy to his family, about saving them from ruin. The prize wasn't merely gold. It was his family's survival, his father's health, and his own redemption. He had 3 days to reach the capital city, a journey fraught with peril and rough terrain. His parents, though doubtful, offered their blessings, their hopes clinging to the faint possibility that this endeavor might awaken a new spirit in their son. As he set out, the path was steep and winding. Other contestants, burdened with heavy packs of provisions and equipment, trudged along, their faces set in grim determination. The ingenious villager, however, traveled light. He carried only what was essential, observing the landscape with renewed intensity. When a section of the path was washed out by a recent storm, forcing others to make a long detour, he spotted a fallen tree trunk perfectly positioned to bridge a narrow gorge. While others grumbled and chose the longer route, he quickly lashed together some strong vines, secured the trunk, and swiftly crossed, gaining precious time. Further on, when a sudden downpour threatened to soak his few belongings, he quickly fashioned a waterproof covering from large overlapping leaves, a technique he had learned from observing animals. Every challenge he met with quick thinking, not brute force. This journey wasn't just physical, it was a mental reawakening, a prelude to the greater trials ahead. Upon reaching the capital city, a vast assembly of competitors had already gathered, their muscles rippling, their stances exuding confidence. The ingenious villager, slender and thoughtful, felt a pang of nervousness. How could he, a man who preferred thinking to lifting, possibly contend with such formidable individuals? His initial fear, however, was quickly overshadowed by the fiery resolve that now burned within him. He remembered his father's weak smile, his mother's silent tears. This was not about him, it was about them. The first challenge was announced with a flourish of trumpets. A vast, shimmering lake stretched before them, its opposite shore barely visible through the morning mist. The task? Cross the lake. The first 3 competitors to reach the far bank would proceed to the final round. No boats, no external assistance allowed, only what they carried or could fashion from the immediate surroundings. At the starting signal, a roar erupted from the crowd. The strong swimmers, magnificent in their athleticism, plunged into the cool waters, churning them into a foamy frenzy. They powered forward with powerful strokes, their bodies cutting through the water like arrows. The ingenious villager, however, remained rooted to the spot. He knew his swimming prowess was average at best. To attempt to outswim these titans would be folly, a guaranteed failure. As the others rapidly pulled ahead, a sense of calm settled over him. This wasn't a swimming race, he realized. It was a race to cross the lake. The king's rules were precise. He scanned the shoreline frantically, his eyes darting between the dense reeds, the scattered driftwood, and the remnants of an old fishing camp nearby. His gaze landed on a collection of large, hollow gourds discarded by fishermen and a tangle of sturdy, dried vines. An idea, wild and audacious, sparked in his mind. While the other contestants were already halfway across, he raced into the reeds, gathering the gourds. Their buoyancy was remarkable. Next, he quickly began weaving the vines, using his knowledge of knots and structural integrity to create a strong, flexible frame. He then carefully lashed the gourds to the frame, creating a rudimentary yet remarkably stable flotation device, a sort of personal, buoyant platform. He even found a broken oar discarded near the camp, which he quickly repurposed as a paddle. The crowd, which had initially laughed at his delayed start, now watched in confused silence. What was he doing? Was he building a small island? As he pushed his gourd raft into the water, a ripple of murmurs spread. Other competitors, catching a glimpse of him as they gasped for breath, scoffed and resumed their vigorous strokes. But the ingenious villager was undeterred. He clambered onto his makeshift vessel, kneeling low, and began to paddle with steady, measured strokes. The gourds, though simple, provided excellent flotation, and the paddle, though rough, propelled him forward with surprising efficiency. Slowly but surely, he began to gain on the tiring swimmers. Their powerful strokes, while initially fast, were unsustainable. Muscles screamed, lungs burned, and fatigue began to set in. He watched as some slowed to a crawl, others resorted to backstrokes, their faces contorted in pain. He, however, continued his rhythmic paddling, conserving his energy, leveraging the physics of buoyancy and leverage. He passed one powerful swimmer, then another, then a third, their exhausted expressions turning to disbelief as this lazy man glided past them. The cheers from the shore, initially for the strong contenders, now began to turn into a stunned, then excited roar for the ingenious villager. He felt the burning in his shoulders, the ache in his arms, but the image of his family, waiting, depending on him, pushed him forward. With a final, desperate surge, he crossed the finish line in third place, just behind two of the most athletic swimmers who collapsed onto the sand, gasping for air. He had proven that intelligence combined with a clear purpose could outmaneuver pure physical prowess. The next day, the air crackled with anticipation for the final challenge. Only 3 contestants remained. The 2 formidable swimmers, whose strength was undeniable, and the ingenious villager, whose unexpected victory in the lake had transformed him from a subject of ridicule to a figure of intrigued speculation. The king himself was present, seated on a magnificent dais, eager to witness the ultimate display of ingenuity and resolve. The final task was revealed. Each contestant was presented with an enormous block of solid, unyielding oak, roughly the size of a small cart and incredibly heavy. The objective was to move this massive block a full kilometer across a designated course to a finish line. The course was not flat. It included a gentle incline, a stretch of loose gravel, and a final path through compacted earth. Behind each block lay an assortment of tools, and the rules were strict. Each competitor could choose only one tool to aid them. The first contestant, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, wasted no time. He immediately grabbed a thick, coiled rope, cinched it around his oak block, and, grunting with immense effort, began to pull. His muscles strained, veins bulging, as he slowly, agonizingly dragged the block forward, foot by painful foot. The crowd roared its encouragement, marveling at his brute strength. The second contestant, a veteran strongman with a cunning glint in his eye, chose a long, stout lever made of ironwood. He positioned it carefully under his block, found a fulcrum, and began to painstakingly pry and push, inching the enormous weight forward. It was a more calculated approach than pure pulling, but still demanded immense physical exertion, a slow dance of physics and power. The ingenious villager, however, did not rush. He walked slowly around his colossal block of oak, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. He ignored the various ropes, chains, levers, and rollers laid out. His gaze was fixed, not on the block's immobility, but on its composition. Oak, he knew, was incredibly dense and heavy. Attempting to drag or lever it would be a grueling, perhaps impossible task for him. He remembered his father's words. What if a task came that could not be outwitted, only endure? This, he realized, was such a task, but perhaps endurance could take a different form. He considered the options. A rope would require pulling immense weight, a lever, constant repositioning. Rollers, while efficient, would require lifting the block onto them, then constantly moving them from back to front, a process just as demanding. His mind raced, searching for an elegant solution, a way to transform the problem itself. He looked at the vast, immovable object, then at the small, seemingly insignificant tools. Finally, his eyes landed on a simple, well-sharpened small knife, a woodcarver's blade no bigger than his hand. A collective gasp went through the crowd as he reached for the knife. "A knife?" someone whispered, disbelief thick in their voice. "How can a knife move a block that size?" The king himself leaned forward, a quizzical expression on his face. The other competitors, seeing his choice, even managed a tired chuckle amidst their struggle. They thought he had finally succumbed to foolishness. But the ingenious villager had a vision. He knelt beside the massive block, and with deliberate, methodical precision, he began to carve. He didn't try to move the block, he began to change it. With the small, sharp blade, he started to shave away the corners, then the edges, slowly transforming the square, stubborn monolith into something else entirely. He understood that a block, with its flat surfaces, relied on friction and brute force to move. A sphere, however, relied on rolling. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, beating down relentlessly. The two strong men continued their arduous struggle, their progress measured in feet, their bodies glistening with sweat, their faces etched with exhaustion. They looked up occasionally, watching the ingenious villager, still hunched over his block, still carving. They thought he was mad, wasting precious time. But the ingenious villager was not wasting time. He was investing it. His hands ached, his forearms burned with a different kind of exertion, a concentrated, relentless effort. He applied techniques he'd learned from crafting intricate wooden toys, focusing on balance and symmetry. He knew he had to create a perfectly rounded shape to ensure effortless rolling. After what felt like an eternity, as the other competitors neared the halfway mark, the ingenious villager finally stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. Where there had once been a massive rectangular block of oak, there now stood a perfectly spherical wooden ball, still incredibly heavy, but fundamentally transformed. The crowd collectively gasped. They had never witnessed such a thing. The strong men, momentarily forgetting their own struggles, stared in open-mouthed astonishment. With a deep breath, the ingenious villager positioned himself behind his newly carved sphere. He gave it a gentle push, and then, with a little more force, he pushed again. The wooden ball, now free from the tyranny of friction, began to roll. Slowly at first, then gaining momentum, it glided effortlessly across the ground. He didn't need to lift it, he didn't need to drag it. He simply needed to guide it. When it hit the incline, it required more effort, but he could lean into it, applying consistent pressure, allowing the round shape to do most of the work. On the gravel, it rolled over the loose stones with surprising ease. On the compacted earth, it picked up speed. The other two contestants, though strong, were utterly depleted. Their progress had slowed to a crawl. The ingenious villager, though tired from hours of carving, was now performing a task that was physically demanding, but biomechanically far more efficient. He passed the second contestant, then the first, his wooden spear rolling majestically towards the finish line. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar, a mixture of shock, admiration, and pure exhilaration. No one had ever imagined such an elegant, brilliant solution. With a final, triumphant push, the ingenious villager sent his transformed oak sphere across the finish line. He was the victor. The king himself rose, clapping, a broad smile spreading across his face. The lazy villager, who sought only efficiency, had, through the crucible of necessity and the power of pure wit, outmaneuvered brute force and achieved the impossible. His family was saved, his father would recover, and he, the ingenious villager, had finally understood that true strength lay not just in muscle, but in the intelligent application of mind, fueled by the deepest of motivations. What an incredible journey, isn't it? The story of the ingenious villager teaches us a profound lesson that extends far beyond the rice paddies and the king's competition. It shows us that what might appear as laziness on the surface can often be a powerful, untapped drive for efficiency and innovation. Our protagonist wasn't truly lazy. He was a problem solver who sought smarter ways, not harder ones. But the true transformation, the spark that ignited his latent genius into undeniable action, was the powerful motivation of his family. It was the love for his ailing father, the concern for his mother, and the desperate need to save his siblings from ruin that pushed him beyond his comfort zone. It forced him to leverage his natural inclination for cleverness, not just for personal ease, but for a profound, selfless purpose. And when that purpose was engaged, his wit became an unstoppable force, demonstrating unequivocally that intelligence, when coupled with unwavering determination, can triumph over any brute strength or seemingly insurmountable obstacle. So, if you ever find yourself struggling with what you perceive as laziness, or if others label you as such, remember the ingenious villager. Ask yourself, what is my powerful why? What is the deep, compelling reason that could ignite your unique talents and turn your desire for efficiency into groundbreaking solutions? Whether it's for your family, your dreams, a community in need, or simply to prove to yourself what you are truly capable of, find that strong reason. Let it fuel your mind, sharpen your focus, and empower you to approach challenges not with dread, but with ingenious curiosity. Don't be afraid to think differently, to challenge conventional wisdom, and to seek the smart path over the simply strenuous one. You might just discover that your unique way of seeing the world is not a weakness, but your greatest strength. Embrace your ingenuity, find your purpose, and watch as you transform obstacles into stepping stones for extraordinary success. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of inspiration, please give this video a thumbs up. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What's your powerful why? And if you want to hear more stories that inspire, challenge, and entertain, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our next adventure. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in our next story.